The Cynocephali, or dog-headed people, are the surprisingly often mentioned creatures of the ancient and antiquity world. Meaning exactly what it sounds like, the Cynocephali are apparently a race of people with the body of a normal human and the head of a dog. They were widely accepted as fact to be a race of warriors who served as valiant adversaries in battle. This sounds wild and unbelievable at first mention, but when you actually look at the first-hand testimonies of those from history who apparently interacted with these beings, it does make you scratch your head. The legends and accounts regarding the Cynocephali date back as far as the 12th century BC, in almost every culture in the world from Europe and Greece to Arabia and Asia. As with many superstitious beliefs, the Cynocephali were widely believed to be a real race of people, and the reasons for this belief vary between cultures, with some instances being founded in pure religious legend and others being based on actual first-hand testimonies. In this episode, we'll be taking a look at these various accounts in which beings with dog heads are recorded to see what all of it might mean. In my opinion, the most unremarkable examples of dog-headed beings are among the gods of ancient religions. Gods such as Anubis are depicted with canine heads, although I do not think this is anything to pay attention to. The gods of ancient religions have many different hybrid forms and depictions that may be based on nothing more than imagination. I'm sure that many ancient mythological beings and gods, such as titans, were based on a real person or thing, but to substantiate the existence of dog people by using depictions of ancient pagan gods is pretty shaky. Although it does prove that at least the concept of dog-headed beings dates back quite far. The far more substantial and interesting evidence are the accounts that actually record the physical existence of and even interactions with the Cynocephali. The earliest formal account I was able to find was from the Greek physician Ctesias in his description of India. Rather than paraphrasing it for you, I'll just read his fascinating entries on the people he apparently witnessed. On these mountains there live men with the head of a dog, whose clothing is the skin of wild beasts. They speak no language but bark like dogs, and in this manner make themselves understood by each other. Their teeth are larger than those of dogs, their nails like those of these animals, but longer and rounder. They inhabit the mountains as far as the river Indus. Their complexion is swarthy, they are extremely just, like the rest of the Indians with whom they associate. They understand the Indian language but are unable to converse, only barking or making signs with their hands and fingers by way of reply, like the deaf and dumb. They are called by the Indians Kalistri, in Greek Cynocephali. They live on raw meat. They number about 120,000. The Cynocephali living on the mountains do not practice any trade, but live by hunting. When they have killed an animal, they roast it in the sun. They also rear numbers of sheep, goats, and asses, drinking the milk of the sheep and whey made from it. They eat the fruit of the Sipticora, whence amber is procured, since it is sweet. They also dry it and keep it in baskets, as the Greeks keep their dried grapes. They make rafts which they load with this fruit together with well-cleaned purple flowers and 260 talents of amber, with the same quantity of the purple dye, and 1,000 additional talents of amber, which they send annually to the King of India. They exchange the rest for bread, flour, and cotton stuffs with the Indians, from whom they also buy swords for hunting wild beasts, bows, and arrows, being very skillful in drawing the bow and hurling the spear. They cannot be defeated in war since they inhabit lofty and inaccessible mountains. Every 5 years the king sends them a present of 300,000 bows, as many spears, 120,000 shields, and 50,000 swords. They do not live in houses but in caves. They set out for the chase with bows and spears, and as they are very swift on foot, they pursue and soon overtake their quarry. The women have a bath once a month. The men do not have a bath at all, but only wash their hands. They anoint themselves 3 times a month with oil made from milk and wipe themselves with skins. The clothes of men and women alike are not skins with the hair on, but skins tanned and very fine. The richest wear linen clothes, but they are few in number. They have no beds but sleep on leaves or grass. He who possesses the greatest number of sheep is considered the richest, and so in regard to their other possessions. All both men and women have tails above their hips, like dogs, but longer and more hairy. They are just and live longer than any other men, 170, sometimes 200 years. Pliny the Elder actually makes reference to this documentation of the Cynocephali in Book 7, Chapter 2 of The Natural History from 77 AD. On many of the mountains again there is a tribe of men who have the heads of dogs and clothe themselves with the skins of wild beasts. Instead of speaking they bark, and furnished with claws they live by hunting and catching birds. According to the story as given by Ctesias, the number of these people is more than 120,000. Marco Polo apparently encountered them too, as recorded in the Book of the Travels of Marco Polo, published in 1300 AD. Angamanain is a very large island. The people are without a king and are idolaters, and no better than wild beasts. And I assure you all the men of this island of Angamanain have heads like dogs, and teeth and eyes likewise. In fact, in the face they are all just like big mastiff dogs. They have a quantity of spices, but they are a most cruel generation, and eat everybody that they can catch, if not their own race. Many other travelers from all over the world also recorded encounters with these creatures, such as Ibn Battuta, Chinese Buddhist missionary Hui Shen, Paul the Deacon, even Christopher Columbus, and a long list of others. Each of the descriptions of the dog-headed people are mostly the same. It is unclear if these are just legends building upon one another, or actual similar genuine accounts. I have yet to mention perhaps the strangest side of these accounts, that being the belief in the Cynocephali's influence on the Christian world in late antiquity. Christian thinkers at the time struggled not with whether or not the Cynocephali existed, but rather what to do about them. They questioned their humanity, wondering if they were descendants of Adam or some kind of other species entirely. The question of if they had souls or not is touched on extensively in the letter of a 9th century monk named Ratramnus. The form of their heads and their canine barking shows that they are similar not to humans but to animals. In fact, the heads of humans are on top and round in order for them to see the heavens, while those of dogs are long and drawn out in a snout so that they can look at the ground, and humans speak while dogs bark. Even one of the most famous Christian theologians in history, St. Augustine, commented on the Cynocephali, among other things in chapter 8 of the 16th book of The City of God. What shall I say of the Cynocephali, whose dog-like head and barking proclaim them beasts rather than men, but we are not bound to believe all we hear of these monstrosities. The weirdest part of this side of the evidence is the Eastern Orthodox Church's depiction of the person they call Saint Christopher. Icons of this saint show him with the head of a dog, identified as someone who was part of a warrior tribe of other Cynocephali who was captured, met Jesus, and became a Christian after being baptized. This is likely pure legend, as the story of this saint differs between the various churches that he was canonized in, and the story itself is also from a clearly exaggerated narrative. It's clear that there are a large number of sources from history supporting the existence of the Cynocephali. The belief in these creatures was so widespread that had you asked an average person in medieval Europe if they existed, it seems probable that their answer would have been a resounding yes. However, the various accounts and universal acceptance in history does not indicate that the Cynocephali exist at all. It is possible, like many things, that the accounts supporting their existence are completely fabricated, and that belief in them is based on nothing but superstition. But it is also possible, probable even, that all of these accounts are based on things that were actually witnessed, only highly exaggerated or misunderstood. It is possible that the Cynocephali are based on real animals or people with some kind of deformity, or something else entirely. Perhaps a good place to look for evidence of this phenomenon is in the medical field. The next section is going to be purely medical cases in which doctors have apparently examined dog people, the most common explanation being deformities and the result of human and dog procreation. Medical cases in which a child is born with the head of a dog are actually greater in number than you would think, but a casual look into them shows that they are not very remarkable. Various medical journals, many of them surfacing in the 1800s, record women giving birth to babies with dog-like features. A medical journal from 1885 reads, Dr. C. Hard of Ottawa, Illinois, reports the following case. A German woman was delivered of a very large female child, weighing 14.5 pounds. The body was well formed and perfect, but the head was almost the exact counterpart of a bull pup, and was the most hideous monstrosity I ever saw. The eyes were up on the forehead, large and round, and protuberant, and were 2.5 inches apart. No eyebrows. The nose was long and flat, and continued to the mouth, with wide open nostrils. The distance from forehead to nose and mouth, 3.5 inches. The ears were small and long, standing out from the sides of the head 1 inch, and looked like the cropped ears of a stable dog. They were 3.5 inches apart. Back of the ears was a single tuft of coarse reddish hair, about 1 inch long. Taking the whole face together, the resemblance to a dog was most striking, and was at once remarked upon by all present, some of whom were anxious that I should dispatch it at once, but I allayed their fears by assuring them that the child would not live. It did live 4 hours, giving out faint moans from time to time. Another journal from 1848 records, I made an examination and was at a loss to determine the presentation. The pains being strong, I was not long kept in suspense. A child was born with a dog's head. In every other respect, it was perfect. The cerebellum and part of the cerebrum were covered with their proper membrane, the dura mater, a cartilaginous substance formed part of the os frontis. The ears were long and lopped down like a dog's. The eyes were very large, and in every respect resembled a dog's. Another journal from 1897 also records nearly the same thing. Something I skipped over in each of those journal entries was the doctor's mention of the condition called anencephaly, a deformity in babies that causes parts of the brains and skull to develop incorrectly. Children born with this condition typically die within an extremely short amount of time after birth. Each of these doctors relating the child's appearance to a dog is probably only out of an attempt to describe the appearance and likely completely unrelated to the Cynocephali myth. Besides, there is no way that the Cynocephali could have been an entire race of people with this condition, as it is not only essentially impossible to live with it for any meaningful amount of time, but it also renders the child debilitated and unable to have normal brain functions. Not to mention that the description of these children is nothing like the Cynocephali, who had full, actual dog heads with elongated snouts, not short, flat faces. There are also many news reports of children with dog faces or features, but they also appear to be cases of anencephaly, other deformities, or just plain hoaxes. I do not think it is fair to say that the Cynocephali exist or existed as some kind of community of deformed humans, in any one location, much less in various places across the world. If they were real in any sense, whether being actual dog-headed humans or merely inspired by some kind of natural creature misconstrued as a monster, they definitely were not a medical anomaly. If they cannot be explained by medical phenomena, then what are they? There have been a number of theories as to what actually inspired the Cynocephali. When I say inspired, I mean to say that the Cynocephali as they were commonly believed do not exist in reality, but are rather a sensationalization of something real, perhaps some kind of monkey or other animal or even normal humans. I'm jumping directly into questioning what inspired them because it is almost guaranteed that they are not actually real. As far as I can tell, no fossils or bones of any of them have ever been found, despite apparently living all over the world in massive communities. We would expect to find much more evidence of their existence if they truly did live in large communities with culture, economy, and governments as we see described by the historians, and obviously if they still existed today, we would likely be aware of them. Beyond reasonable doubt, we can assume that they don't exist, but that doesn't mean that there is no substance to the stories and accounts they appear in. Some have theorized that explorers came across baboons or some other kind of monkey and mistook them for people. This does not make too much sense unless their stories were extremely exaggerated, considering that they claimed these people had human bodies, barked like dogs, wielded spears, had a king, traditions, economy, and all the other markings of an intelligent society unlike any animal one. I think any theory of an animal tribe is likely not the case. It is also possible that these were merely natives that maybe looked funny to the travelers and spoke a language that they thought sounded like barking. This theory would explain the humanness of the tribes, but is found wanting when it comes to how they were so sure that these were literally dog-headed people. With some of the accounts being as detailed as they are, it really leaves you wondering where they got the information from. Were these real stories of travelers coming across tribes of dog people, or are they simply entirely fabricated fables? At the end of the day, it's probably more likely that these are nothing more than myths and legends rather than genuine history, despite making their way into what were meant to be historical documents. The existence of the Cynocephali was for centuries not a question of fact or fiction. To the average person all the way to the most prestigious historians and theologians, the dog-headed people were seen as a common facet of reality, although still being strange and elusive. The widespread belief in these creatures likely fell out of popularity due to the simple fact that people no longer saw them. As knowledge increased, much of what the world used to view as reality was realized to be superstition. The existence of the Cynocephali may be just that, or perhaps it is something more. With all creatures like this, whether it is Mothman, Bigfoot, Skinwalkers, or even something as broad as aliens, there is always some kernel of truth. Something made these ancient explorers write down that they interacted with dog people, although the reason may forever remain unknown. Overall, the Cynocephali are truly a mystery. Perhaps they were misunderstood people or animals, perhaps they didn't exist at all. Or maybe they really do exist, and there is a secret race of dog people warriors waiting for their time to rise up and reclaim their place in the world. You never know what you might find in the mysteries of history.